Why did they all stop talking the moment she stepped off the bus? No one said a word, but every pair of eyes followed her like a question that didn't belong. The steel-gray transport hissed as it shut down, its door folding open with military precision. Through that doorway stepped Maya Sinclair's small frame, auburn hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun, plain gray sweater, dark jeans, and a duffel that looked too light for what waited ahead. She didn't look like a recruit, didn't look like someone trying to be noticed either, just quiet, deliberate, and out of place, like a civilian who'd wandered into the wrong movie set. Around her, the Naval Special Warfare Training Center at Little Creek pulsed with motion, men and women in perfect uniforms, boots shining, energy radiating like challenge. These were candidates who lived for this kind of test. Shoulders square, jaws tight, every movement screaming, "I belong here." Maya walked through them as if the noise didn't reach her. Her footsteps were soft, but her pace was steady, the rhythm of someone who had long since stopped needing to prove anything. Inside registration, a young sailor scanned her paperwork. His expression shifted from routine boredom to confusion. Ma'am," he said carefully, flipping another page. "There seems to be—" "The documentation is complete," she interrupted gently. Her tone wasn't sharp, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that made people obey without quite knowing why. The clerk hesitated, then nodded, stamping her file and sliding it forward. Still, his curiosity lingered. The forms were correct, every stamp in place, every code valid, yet most of it was blacked out, redacted, entire sections hidden behind authorization levels far above his clearance. And then there was the note, short, typed, unsigned. "Candidate Sinclair, background classified. Do not inquire." He'd seen special candidates before, intelligence transfers, cross-branch operators, but never one like this. There was something deliberate about the way she revealed nothing. No history, no service record, no visible rank, just her name. When he handed her the standard-issue duffel and pointed toward the barracks, he still felt unsettled. As she walked away, he caught himself staring at the back of her neck, at the faint, almost invisible line of an old scar vanishing beneath her collar. He didn't know why, but that tiny scar told him she'd been through things that didn't exist on official maps. The women's candidate base smelled like detergent, sweat, and fresh paint, a mix that could only mean new recruits. Maya dropped her duffel on the lower bunk, folded her sweater neatly, and began unpacking. The room quieted around her. 7 women, all top of their branches, watched her with suspicion. Staff Sergeant Victoria Blake, 26, Marine, chest full of ribbons, arms like she could snap steel, was the first to speak. "So what's your story, sweetheart?" Her tone carried that dangerous mix of authority and mockery. "Which general's daughter are you?" Maya didn't look up. She kept folding her shirt, precise, even corners. "I'm here to complete the program, same as everyone else." Blake snorted. "Right, and I'm here for the vacation." A few laughs followed, not cruel but sharp enough to test boundaries. "You do realize," Blake added, leaning forward, "this isn't summer camp. People wash out in the first week. You look like you'd have trouble opening a pickle jar." Maya finished folding, placed her clothes with mathematical alignment, and finally met Blake's gaze. Her voice stayed calm. "I appreciate your concern. I'm sure your experience will be valuable during training." It wasn't a challenge, but it wasn't submission either. Blake blinked, thrown off balance by the lack of reaction. Most recruits either pushed back or flinched. Maya had done neither. Private First Class Tiffany Lewis, blonde, Army Ranger, 23, muscles carved by years of grinding through the impossible, joined in. "No offense," she said, knowing full well she meant some. "But what unit were you in? Everyone here's got combat time. You gotta have something to get into this program." "I've served in various capacities," Maya said, closing her duffel. "The specifics aren't something I'm authorized to discuss." That answer was too smooth, too official, and it only made them more suspicious. Word spread fast through the candidate barracks. The quiet red-haired woman with the librarian face and the sealed file. Some said she was a politician's relative. Others swore she was CIA. A few joked she was a desk clerk who filled out the wrong form. By dinner, every eye in the mess hall tracked her like radar. She ate alone. When the evening briefing began, Maya chose a seat at the back. She listened, no unnecessary movement, no wasted notes. Around her, candidates asked endless questions about procedures, timing, standards. She said nothing. But her eyes, they missed nothing. Lieutenant Nathan Cross, their lead instructor, noticed her from the front. He was 34, former Ranger, decorated in 3 combat deployments, known for breaking down arrogance until all that was left was truth. He expected to see anxiety or overconfidence in new recruits. Maya showed neither. Just calm absorption, the kind of quiet that belonged to someone with nothing left to prove. When the briefing ended and candidates spilled out, joking and comparing expectations, she waited until everyone left. Only then did she rise, adjust her gear, and step into the cool Virginia night. The wind carried the smell of salt from the nearby water. Somewhere, a bell rang. Lights from the compound stretched long shadows across the pavement. Tomorrow, the real training would begin. But Maya already knew something no one else did. She survived training that made this place look like basic warm-up. Her scars, the ones hidden under those simple clothes, weren't symbolic. They were coordinates of pain and survival, and if anyone here thought they could break her, they'd already lost before it started. She smiled faintly, not arrogance, just recognition. They had no idea what they were about to face. 500 hours. The alarm hit like an explosion. Most candidates stumbled awake, half-dressed, scrambling for gear. Maya was already standing, lacing her boots. Blake groaned from the upper bunk. "You been up all night, princess." "No," Maya said, tucking her blanket with surgical precision. "Just awake." The other women exchanged looks, annoyance mixed with confusion. Who gets up before the alarm during SEAL prep? The answer was simple. Someone whose body had learned that alarms can mean incoming fire. Outside, the cold bit through the morning. Instructors barked orders, their voices echoing off concrete and steel. The first physical test, a 2-mile run in full gear, followed by obstacle courses designed to break egos, not just bodies. "Let's go," Lieutenant Cross's voice cut the air like a whip. Maya fell into formation, small frame swallowed by heavy gear. She neither lagged nor sprinted, just steady, efficient movement. Every step measured, every breath controlled. Blake noticed. "Keep up if you can," she muttered, surging ahead. But Maya did, easily. Halfway through, Lewis glanced back. Maya's breathing hadn't changed. Her pace never faltered. She wasn't showing off, but she wasn't struggling either. It was infuriating. "She's faking," Lewis gasped to Corporal Mason, a Navy EOD tech running beside her. Mason chuckled between breaths. "Then she's really good at faking." They didn't know that for Maya this wasn't training. It was memory. Every incline, every stretch of exhaustion echoed the past, jungles, deserts, cities where the air itself carried threat. The course ended. Maya finished mid-pack, unremarkable, unnoticed, exactly how she wanted it. But then came the obstacle course. That's where everything changed. Candidates hurled themselves across walls, ropes, and beams. Some powered through on muscle. Others relied on brute determination. Maya waited, watched each one, calculating. When she finally moved, her execution was silent, precise. Rope climb, no flailing, no wasted energy. Her feet locked perfectly, arms pulling only when necessary. She moved with the precision of a climber who knew the cost of mistakes. Wall vault efficient, crawl under wire flawless. Lieutenant Cross found himself watching her, frowning. Her movements weren't random, they were engineered. She was using techniques he'd only seen from reconnaissance specialists. People trained to move unseen, unheard, unnoticed. "Where did you learn to move like that?" he asked after the exercise, meeting her near the water station. Maya wiped her face with a towel. "Various training courses, sir. That's not standard military technique." "Some courses aren't standard, sir." It wasn't arrogance, just truth left hanging in the air. That evening, gossip became suspicion. Blake slammed her tray down at a table, glaring across the hall. "Nobody moves like that unless they've had advanced training. If she's that good, why's she here?" Mason shrugged. "Maybe she got kicked out somewhere else." "Or maybe," Lewis added, "she's spying for a contractor or something." It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was fear, the kind that grows when someone threatens your definition of strength. Across the hall, Maya sat alone, notebook open. The pages were filled with small, precise handwriting, technical notes, not personal thoughts, equipment efficiency, team dynamics, psychological observations. She wasn't writing feelings. She was conducting analysis. Every exercise, every instructor, every failure, all data. And if anyone could have read the coded shorthand in her notes, they'd have realized something chilling. She wasn't training for the program. She was evaluating it. She looked up once, eyes sweeping the room. She saw Blake's hostility, Lewis's curiosity, Mason's ego. She cataloged each of them, personality types, reaction patterns, predictable weaknesses. Then she wrote one quiet line under her last entry. Observation complete. Phase 2, psychological. When lights went out, the barracks fell into uneasy silence. Blake whispered in the dark, "She's hiding something." And from the lower bunk, where Maya lay perfectly still, eyes open to the black ceiling above, a quiet thought passed through her mind, not fear, not anger, just clarity. She'd seen this pattern before, the suspicion, the isolation, the attempts to break her. People fear what they don't understand. And tomorrow they would push harder, try to find the limits she didn't have. She closed her eyes, her breathing slowed, her hand rested on the notebook under her pillow. This was no longer training. It was assessment of them, not her. And by the time they realized it, it would be too late. What does silence sound like when it's waiting to explode? By dawn, that silence had a name: Victoria Blake. She stood at the head of the women's bay, arms folded, eyes hard as granite, watching Maya tie her boots. For 3 days, Blake's irritation had been simmering like a fuse, and today she intended to light it. The morning air outside was thick with Virginia humidity. The instructors barked orders across the field, voices sharp and rhythmic. A whistle blew, and the candidates fell into formation. Maya moved to her spot, same calm posture, same quiet readiness. But Blake's stare burned holes through her back. To everyone else, this was another day of training. For Blake, it was a battle for dominance. The schedule began with endurance drills, sprints, burpees, push-ups, log carries. Sweat-soaked uniforms, mud clung to faces, and exhaustion stripped away bravado. Maya didn't lead, but she never faltered. Her breathing stayed even, her eyes focused, every movement measured, deliberate, the precision of a soldier who'd learned to conserve strength for when it mattered most. Cross watched from the edge of the field, arms crossed. He still hadn't figured her out. She wasn't breaking, not physically, not mentally. Candidates always cracked somewhere, a flinch, a complaint, a moment of hesitation. Maya had none. It wasn't natural, it was practiced. He made a note on his clipboard. Candidate Sinclair, emotional baseline remains constant. Investigate background. He didn't know it, but there was no background to find. When the drills ended, the candidates collapsed near the bleachers, gulping water and gasping for air. Maya sat alone, eyes half closed, her breathing slowing back to normal in less than a minute. Lewis glanced at her, frustration tightening her jaw. She doesn't even sweat like a normal person. Blake wiped mud from her hands. She's putting on a show, nobody that calm. Maybe she's just good, Lewis muttered. Good, Blake barked a laugh. She's hiding something, and I'm going to find out what. Her words weren't just resentment now, they were promise. After lunch came hand-to-hand combat training. The mats were slick with disinfectant, the air filled with the scent of rubber and sweat. Cross stood in front of them, clipboard under his arm. Pair up, he said. We're evaluating technique, composure, and adaptability under pressure. Blake's hand shot up. Sir, I'll take Sinclair. Cross hesitated. He knew Blake's type, strong, proud, allergic to losing, but he also wanted to see what Maya could do. Approved, he said. The circle formed around them. Maya and Blake faced each other, barefoot on the mat. Blake cracked her neck and grinned. Don't worry, princess, I'll go easy. Maya said nothing. She simply observed the stance, the breathing, the subtle favoring of Blake's left knee. She'd seen that limp before, old shrapnel injury not fully healed. Begin, Cross barked. Blake lunged. Maya barely moved. She slipped to the side, redirected the attack with her forearm and tapped Blake's shoulder, light, precise, but perfectly placed. The Marine stumbled. The observers gasped. Blake's jaw tightened. Lucky. She attacked again, faster, angrier. A flurry of punches. Maya deflected one, redirected another, pivoted, and suddenly Blake was on the mat, air knocked from her lungs. Maya didn't follow up. She stepped back, calm, composed. Enough, Cross said, but Blake wasn't done. She shot up, eyes burning, and tried to grab Maya from behind. The smaller woman moved like water. One moment Blake's arm was around her throat. The next Maya had twisted, redirected momentum, and Blake was face down, arm pinned in a joint lock that looked gentle until you realized how easily it could break bone. Enough, Cross barked again, louder. Maya released immediately and stepped back to attention. The room was silent, except for Blake's ragged breathing. Cross's gaze lingered on Maya, analytical, uneasy. Where did you learn that? Various programs, sir. Which programs? Classified. There was no arrogance in her tone, just a fact. Blake stood, her pride bleeding faster than the scrape on her arm. She met Maya's calm eyes and saw no gloating, only neutrality. That somehow made it worse. That evening, whispers spread like wildfire through the facility. She dropped Blake. With one hand. Did you see that joint lock? That's Black Ops level. The rumors grew with every retelling. By dinner, Maya wasn't just mysterious, she was mythical. And myths make people nervous. Blake sat at a corner table, staring into her meal tray, jaw clenched. Mason leaned beside her. She's not one of us, he said quietly. Her movements, her tactics, they're too clean, like she's rehearsed this 100 times. Lewis frowned. Then why is she here? Blake's eyes darkened. That's exactly what I'm going to find out. That night the bay lights dimmed, the fan hummed overhead, but Blake didn't sleep. She sat up on her bunk, staring at the outline of Maya's still figure below. The faint glow from a streetlight traced her features, calm, breathing slow, hands resting on that notebook she always carried. Blake whispered to Lewis across the room, "You ever see her write in that thing?" "All the time," Lewis said sleepily. "She fills it after every exercise." "What's in it?" "Notes, I guess." Blake's eyes narrowed. No one takes that many notes, not unless they're reporting to someone. She glanced at Mason, who was half asleep nearby. "We're going to find out." By the end of the week, Operation Reality Check had become an unspoken conspiracy. Blake, Mason, and Lewis, three capable, seasoned soldiers united by one obsession, proved Maya Sinclair was a fraud. Everywhere she went, they watched. Every exercise, every note, every glance. They cataloged her the way she cataloged them. But Maya knew, she always knew. She could feel their eyes, the way silence fell when she entered a room, the way their laughter stopped mid-sentence. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition, the kind drilled into her long before this assignment. She didn't retaliate, she observed, recorded, adapted. In her notebook, she wrote lines that looked like code to anyone else. Subject B, escalation pattern confirmed. Subject M, technical, impulsive, ego-driven. Subject L, follower instinct, fear-based compliance. They thought they were hunting her. She was studying them. Week 2 began with field navigation training, 48 hours in the Virginia wilderness. Each team was assigned a route, a compass, and a mission profile. Maya's team included Blake, Mason, Lewis, and 2 others. Cross made the assignment personally. He wanted to see how the friction played out. Team cohesion, he told them, isn't about liking each other. It's about trust under stress. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. They set off at dawn, rucksacks heavy, radios on low. The forest swallowed them within minutes, humidity thick as fog, insects whining, leaves whispering under boots. Maya carried the map and compass. It was logical. Her previous performance had shown skill in navigation. But when she checked her bearing, something felt wrong. She recalibrated. The needle drifted off by several degrees. She frowned, compass malfunction. Blake smirked, maybe you're holding it wrong. Maya didn't answer. She pulled a backup compass from her own gear and adjusted course. That tiny action, having a spare, unissued instrument, froze Blake for a heartbeat. Who carries backup equipment in training? Someone who's been betrayed by a faulty compass before. Hours passed. The team moved in silence, tension stretching thin as wire. When Maya called for a formation adjustment, Lewis snapped. Maybe if you didn't set such a fast pace, we could actually stay in formation. Maya stopped, turned, and met her eyes calm, measured. Formation integrity prevents exposure. Adjusting speed is irrelevant if spacing fails. You're drifting off angle. Lewis flushed. Blake smirked. She's got an answer for everything. Maya ignored the bait. She gathered the team, conducted a quick review, reassigned positions. Her tone stayed professional, precise. By the end, even the neutral team members were following her lead. Blake hated that, hated how easily calm turned into authority. That night they reached their first objective, a mock observation post near a ridge. Their mission: gather intel on an enemy unit played by instructors. Simple if you weren't sabotaged. Mason, crouched near his pack, pretended to adjust his rifle sling. His finger slipped, and a blank round discharged. The gunshot shattered the silence. Birds erupted from the trees. Somewhere below, instructors shouted, "Mission compromised." Blake cursed, "Nice job, genius." Maya didn't react. "We're blown, adapt." She studied the map, scanned the terrain, and made a decision faster than the others could blink. New observation point, North Ridge, 300 meters. Better elevation, indirect line of sight. Move. They obeyed before realizing she hadn't asked, she'd commanded. 20 minutes later, they reached the alternate site. Using natural cover and near-silent communication, Maya directed each member into position. They completed the objective flawlessly. Cross's voice crackled over the radio. Team Alpha objective achieved. Time recorded. Efficiency noted. Blake stared at Maya through the dark. Every attempt to expose her was turning into proof of her strength. "She's making us look like idiots," Mason muttered. Blake's jaw clenched. "Then we hit harder." Back at the facility, the whispers turned sharper. Sinclair untouchable. She adapted to sabotage. Cross is watching her now. And he was. From his office window, Lieutenant Cross reviewed footage from the field. Maya's movements were textbook perfect, except the textbook hadn't been written yet. He leaned back uneasy. "Who are you?" he murmured. The next morning, during gear inspection, Maya's locker had been tossed, her notebook missing. She found it a few hours later, returned, untouched, lying neatly on her bunk. No note, no explanation. But she knew. The game had shifted from whispers to open moves. She wrote one new line at the bottom of her page. Phase 3 exposure imminent. And under it smaller. Maintain cover until contact. That evening, as the sun bled gold across the parade ground, Maya stood alone outside the barracks. The air was still. She could hear the distant cadence of instructors shouting drills, the faint hum of generators. Somewhere behind her, Blake's voice drifted through the open door, angry, low, conspiring. Maya didn't turn. She just stared toward the horizon, expression unreadable. The game was almost over. They thought they were testing her. But soon, they'd realize she was the one writing the test. How do you trap someone who's already 3 steps ahead? By the start of week 3, that was the question haunting Victoria Blake. She'd done everything, the subtle mockery, the planted rumors, the quiet sabotage. Nothing cracked Maya Sinclair. The woman just absorbed every hit, every insult with that maddening calm. It wasn't strength that unnerved Blake most. It was composure, the kind that made you wonder what she knew that no one else did. And now, Blake wanted an answer, even if it meant breaking every rule in the book to get it. The new week opened with chaos disguised as training. 43 candidates remained. The week had been weeded out, bodies broken, minds frayed, spirits scattered. Those who stayed were the ones too stubborn to quit. Lieutenant Cross stood before them, clipboard under one arm, his voice cutting across the training ground. You've made it farther than most, but don't confuse endurance with excellence. The next evolution will show me who actually belongs here. His eyes scanned the formation, stopping briefly on Maya. He still hadn't decided whether she was an asset or a problem, maybe both. Behind her, Blake's smirk carried quiet malice. The mission briefing came that afternoon. The scenario, a 48-hour field problem, simulated hostile territory, limited resources, overlapping objectives, navigation, intelligence, and extraction under pressure. Each team, Cross said, will have one navigator, one comms lead, and one field commander. Assignments will be posted in 10 minutes. Dismissed. Blake's heart pounded. She spent the last week preparing for this moment. With Mason and Lewis behind her, she'd pushed for one thing: to have Maya in her squad. When the roster appeared, she grinned. Team Alpha, Sergeant Victoria Blake, lead; Corporal Derek Mason; Private First Class Tiffany Lewis; Candidate Maya Sinclair, and 2 others. Perfect. The next morning, dawn crept over the forest like smoke. They moved out at first light, rucksacks heavy, faces streaked with camo paint. The terrain was unforgiving, dense pines, soaked ground, air thick with humidity. Sinclair, you've got navigation, Blake ordered. Yes, Sergeant, Maya replied calmly. Blake waited for hesitation. There was none. The first hour passed in silence. Maya's pace was steady, efficient, always moving, rarely speaking. Every few hundred meters she checked the compass, adjusted the heading, marked coordinates on her map. Blake's stomach twisted. She didn't like how smooth it was going. Then she saw her chance. During a short rest, while the others refilled canteens, Mason slid beside her. We're good to go. Blake nodded. They'd tampered with Maya's compass before departure, offsetting the needle by just a few degrees. It wouldn't cause immediate failure. It would cause confusion, mistakes, questions, the kind that exposed weakness. At least that was the plan. 10 minutes later, Maya paused mid-stride, checking the compass again. Her expression didn't change, but Blake saw it, that tiny flicker in her eyes. You lost, Blake asked. Equipment malfunction, Maya said, unclipping something from her vest. She pulled out a second compass, identical, unissued, a personal backup. Continuing correct bearing, she said simply. Blake's jaw tightened. She shouldn't have had that. Who brings backup gear to training exercise? Someone who'd learned long ago that the difference between success and death was 5 degrees of error. By nightfall, they'd reached their first objective, a ridge overlooking a mock enemy camp. The mission: observe, record, exfiltrate unseen. It should have been easy. Instead, Mason's weapon discharged, a blank round echoing like thunder across the valley. The entire forest froze. Then came shouting instructors, enemy patrols, the sound of simulated chaos. Blake's heart sank. "You idiot," she hissed. Maya didn't flinch. "We're compromised," she said evenly. "Adapt and relocate." "What?" Blake barked. "New position, North Ridge. We can still complete the objective. Move." Her tone was calm but commanding, not a suggestion, not a debate. Blake hesitated. Mason looked ready to argue, but the other two team members were already moving under Maya's direction. Within minutes, the group had relocated, hidden, and re-established visual contact with the target. It was flawless, efficient, silent. From the command center, Cross watched through surveillance feeds. Team Alpha, objective achieved, excellent improvisation. He didn't miss the fact that it was Maya, not Blake, who made it happen. When they returned to camp, Blake's anger boiled. "You don't give orders on my team," she snapped. Maya looked at her, expression unreadable. "I suggested an alternate plan to complete the mission." "You took over," Blake spat. Maya paused. "If that's how it appeared, Sergeant, then I accept the responsibility." That sentence, calm, measured, respectful, disarmed everyone else. It also made Blake feel like the fool. The next morning brought more tension, deliberate, heavy, suffocating. Maya's gear was missing. Her ruck had been emptied, equipment scattered across the dirt. She said nothing, just knelt, gathered her things, cleaned each piece, and repacked. Blake watched from a distance, half expecting an outburst. None came. And that calm, that unshakable composure, made her feel smaller than anger ever could. She told herself Maya was just playing the long game, pretending to be unbothered. But a voice in her head whispered something else. What if she's not pretending at all? Later that day came the combat simulation, a full-contact field assault exercise. Each team would infiltrate, secure an enemy compound, and extract data. Cross gathered them at the command post. "Remember, the goal isn't brute force. It's coordination, adaptability, leadership." Blake barely listened. Her plan was already forming, simple, cruel, effective. She'd make Maya fail publicly. During the operation, she'd isolate her, assign impossible objectives, and document every breakdown. If Maya really was faking it, this would expose her. The exercise began at dawn. The forest was heavy with mist. Team Alpha advanced through the trees, shadows merging with fog. Maya carried the map again. She moved smoothly, body low, eyes scanning constantly. Her mind processed terrain like geometry, angles, elevations, lines of sight. Blake gave quiet orders through the radio. "Sinclair, take point on the next approach." "Copy." Maya moved forward, crouched, every step silent. But the map didn't match the terrain, deliberately. Blake had switched 2 grid coordinates in the briefing, enough to send her into the wrong sector. Within minutes, Maya realized it. The vegetation density, the slope, the orientation, all off. She didn't panic. She recalculated, adjusted route, and used the stars breaking through morning haze to correct the course. When she rejoined them 20 minutes later, Blake was fuming. "Where the hell were you?" "Adjusting to the correct position." "That's not your call." Maya's reply was soft, almost compassionate. "Then perhaps next time confirm your coordinates." It was the first hint of edge in her voice, just enough to make Blake feel the sting of her own mistake. By noon, the exercise had turned into endurance hell, steep climbs, simulated ambushes, constant evaluation. Everyone was breaking down, everyone except Maya. Lewis whispered to Mason between breaths, "She's not human." "She's something else," Mason muttered. They didn't know how right they were. That night the squad bivouacked near a ravine. Blake sat by the fire, face flickering orange in shadow. Her pride was bleeding out. Every attempt to humiliate Maya had backfired. Every trap turned into proof of her competence. Mason leaned close. We could end this right now, force her to show her hand. How? Push her past her limits. Blake's eyes narrowed. She doesn't have limits. Then let's find out. Morning brought the final day of the field mission, and the moment Blake had been waiting for. The instructors handed out sealed envelopes, final objectives. Maya unfolded hers, reconnaissance and simulated hostage recovery at a defended compound. Blake's mind ignited. Perfect. She rewrote the mission plan on the spot. Sinclair, you're taking point, she said. Solo infiltration. Main compound entry will provide overwatch. Maya looked up slowly. That's a single operator penetration against fortified defenses. Exactly. Let's see if those classified skills can actually do something. Even Mason hesitated. Sergeant, that's not protocol. Do it, Blake snapped. The air turned brittle. Maya studied her face, saw the desperation hiding behind the anger, then nodded. Understood. For 5 full minutes she didn't move. She stood near the edge of the trees, eyes tracing the compound in the distance, fences, watchtowers, floodlights, sensors. Her mind ran calculations in silence. Wind speed, timing, rotation intervals. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Any additional intelligence requirements? Just don't get yourself killed, Blake muttered. Maya secured her gear, adjusted her rifle strap and whispered, acknowledged. Then she was gone. No sound, no rustle. One moment she stood among them, the next the forest had swallowed her whole. Blake blinked. Where the hell? Did you see her move? Lewis whispered. Mason frowned, scanning through his scope. She's gone. On the monitors at command, the instructors lost her signal. Sensors flickered. Thermal cameras registered nothing. Lieutenant Cross leaned over a technician. Where is she? Sir, she's inside the compound perimeter. That's impossible. Nobody moves that fast. But she had. Maya flowed through the defenses like mist, exploiting sensor blind spots, neutralizing cameras with precise timing. Her approach wasn't just stealth, it was art. Guards reported malfunctions, patrol routes broke pattern, communications scrambled. Within 18 minutes she had infiltrated, located the hostage, extracted, and vanished back into the tree line. 18 minutes, alone. Cross stared at the monitor, disbelief written across his face. Confirm her time, he ordered. 18 minutes 43 seconds, sir. He exhaled. That's beyond spec, not possible under simulation rules. Yet there it was. When Maya returned, the team was silent. She looked exactly as she had when she'd left, calm, uniform immaculate, breathing normal. Mission complete, she said. Hostage secured, intelligence gathered, extraction successful. Blake stared at her pale. Who are you? Before Maya could respond, the radio crackled to life. Team Alpha, Cross's voice came through tight, urgent. Remain in position, do not move. Command is inbound. Blake looked around, confused. What's happening? Maya's expression didn't change. She just said quietly, it's over. Minutes later, the sound of engines broke the silence, a convoy of black vehicles rolling through the training field. Dust rose behind them like a storm. When they stopped, the doors opened in unison. Out stepped Master Chief Alexander Kane, the legend of legends. 30 years of special operations, the kind of man people whispered about. He walked straight toward them, expression unreadable, flanked by officers whose ranks outshone anything at the base. Every candidate froze. Blake's stomach turned cold. Kane's eyes swept the group, then settled on Maya. Candidate Sinclair, he said, voice like gravel and thunder. "Your performance requires immediate clarification." "Yes, sir," Maya replied, perfectly calm. Kane studied her face, then her posture, then the small insignia on her duffel, one no ordinary candidate would have. He turned to the instructors. "Deactivate recording equipment." Cross blinked, "Sir." "You heard me." And in that moment, the entire compound seemed to hold its breath. Blake didn't know it yet, but everything was about to come undone. What happens when the truth refuses to stay hidden? The air around the training compound had turned thick, as if even the wind hesitated to move. The convoy's engines went silent. The instructors froze mid-command. Every candidate sensed it. Something had shifted beyond their understanding. Master Chief Alexander Kane, the man whose name carried the weight of wars, stepped closer to Maya Sinclair. His boots crunched over gravel, slow, deliberate. "Candidate Sinclair," he said again, his tone lower this time, "you'll accompany me to the command facility, now." "Yes, sir." The words were quiet but steady. Blake, standing a few feet away, felt her throat tighten. She wanted to expose Maya to see her crumble, but now that it was happening, the air itself felt wrong, cold. Two officers flanked Maya. She didn't resist, didn't ask questions, just walked. As she passed Blake, she paused, not long, just enough to let their eyes meet. There was no anger there, no fear, only something that looked a lot like pity. That made Blake's stomach twist more than any accusation could have. Inside the command facility, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly, too bright, too sterile. Cross stood near the monitors, arms folded tight. He looked torn between curiosity and concern. He trained hundreds of candidates, seen arrogance, defiance, fear, but never calm like this. Kane motioned toward a chair. "Sit." Maya did. A junior officer placed her dossier on the table, thick, sealed, the edges marked with security codes. Kane opened it. Half the pages were blacked out, entire sections of text obliterated by heavy ink. "Who authorized this entry?" Cross asked quietly. Kane didn't answer. He just turned one of the pages and read the line printed in red. "Candidate admitted under Directive 7. Clearance, Phantom Class." The room went still. Cross frowned. "Phantom Class, that's not possible, that's above our level," Kane finished. He closed the file, studied Maya for a long moment, then said something that froze everyone present. "Remove your jacket." Maya didn't move for a second, not from defiance but from disappointment. "Sir," she said softly, "with respect, that won't be necessary." "It's not a request." A quiet breath escaped her. Then she stood, turned her back to them, and began to unbutton her uniform jacket. The sound was deafening in its simplicity, fabric sliding, metal clicking. She set the jacket aside, stood there in her undershirt, the thin gray fabric clinging to her shoulders. "Higher," Kane said. Cross's brow furrowed. "Sir, this isn't." "Do it," Kane ordered. Maya reached behind her neck and slowly pulled the shirt over her head. The room fell utterly silent. There, running down her spine from the nape of her neck to just above her lower back, was a tattoo. It wasn't decorative, it wasn't random. It was an emblem, black ink over scar tissue, intricate, geometric, unmistakable. The room seemed to shrink around it, because they all recognized it. Even Blake, watching from behind the observation glass, felt her knees weaken. The symbol belonged to a unit that didn't officially exist. The Phantom Directive. A covert task force buried so deep under the intelligence web that even most generals didn't know its operatives by name. Their existence was rumor, myth, the kind of story soldiers told in the dark when no one was supposed to listen. And now, standing half-bare under the cold white lights, was one of them. Kane's voice was low. "You were supposed to be gone." Maya turned slowly. "Gone is a relative term, sir." Cross's eyes darted between them. "Sir, what is she?" Kane ignored him. He stepped closer, his tone quieter now, almost respectful, almost afraid. "You vanished after Operation Iron Veil. No record, no extraction report. Everyone presumed." "Dead," Maya finished for him. "That was the point." The silence that followed wasn't just heavy, it was sacred. Kane exhaled, jaw tight. "You had no clearance to re-enter any program. Who reinstated you?" "I reinstated myself," she said softly, "for observation." "Observation," Cross repeated. Maya looked at him, not with superiority, but with a kind of sad clarity. "Your candidates are the future of special warfare. I was tasked once with building them. Now I wanted to see if they still understood why they fight." Kane's eyes narrowed. "You infiltrated an active SEAL preparatory unit under false documentation to observe." "Yes, sir." "And what exactly were you hopping to find?" Her gaze flickered, not defiance, not pride, but something heavier. "Humanity, sir. The kind that training tends to strip away." No one spoke for a long time. Behind the glass, Blake felt her heart hammer against her ribs. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. The woman she'd mocked, sabotaged, humiliated wasn't a recruit. She was someone who'd seen and survived things that Blake couldn't even imagine. And now, as Maya stood there stripped bare, scarred, silent, Blake realized how wrong she'd been. Maya hadn't been hiding weakness. She'd been hiding history. Kane finally broke the silence. "You violated chain of command, falsified identity, and compromised operational integrity. Give me one reason I shouldn't have you detained right now." Maya's expression didn't change. "Because you already know why I came back." Kane's eyes hardened. "Enlighten me." She stepped forward, voice steady but softer now. The kind of voice that carried truth like a blade hidden under silk. "When I disappeared, it wasn't because of injury or insubordination. It was because I saw what our missions were turning into: numbers, objectives, metrics. No heart, no reflection, just targets." Cross looked away. The words hit too close. "I followed orders. I did my part. But every mission cost us pieces we never got back." She took a slow breath. "So I walked away, but you can't really walk away, can you? You can leave the uniform, the rank, the war, but it doesn't leave you. It just waits, in silence, until one day you hear it again." Kane's face softened for the briefest moment, old ghosts flickering behind his eyes. "And when I heard about this new generation," Maya continued, "I wanted to see if they'd forgotten the one thing that kept us human: dignity. The kind that doesn't shout or break. The kind that stands quietly even when stripped bare in front of everyone." Her last words weren't defiance, they were grace. Even Kane had to look away. A long pause followed. Cross cleared his throat. "Sir, with all due respect, she's not wrong. The training's become—" Kane held up a hand. "Enough." He turned back to Maya. "You'll stay confined to quarters until further notice. This conversation doesn't leave this room." "Yes, sir." He stared at her one last time, searching for something, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps memory, and then walked out. The door shut behind him with the weight of decades. Cross lingered, watching her rebutton her jacket, movements slow but dignified. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. Maya gave a faint, sad smile. "Would you have believed me?" He shook his head. "Probably not." "Then it's better this way." He hesitated, then said something that surprised even him. "You changed something here, whether they admit it or not." Her eyes softened. "Change doesn't come from shouting orders, Lieutenant. It comes from being the kind of silence people can't ignore." She walked past him, calm, unbroken, somehow taller than before, leaving behind a room full of officers who no longer knew whether they'd just interrogated a ghost or a mirror. That night, Blake sat alone on her bunk. The rest of the candidates were whispering, gossiping, confused. But she wasn't talking, she couldn't. Her mind replayed every insult, every challenge, every mocking word. And the look Maya had given her when she passed, that quiet, almost forgiving look, burned deeper than any punishment could have. She glanced toward the far end of the bay. Maya's bunk was empty. The locker cleaned out. Gone. Hours later, the door creaked open. Maya stepped inside quietly, wearing plain civilian clothes, her duffel slung over one shoulder. Blake stood up. "You're leaving." Maya nodded once, "For now." Blake's throat tightened. "You could have told me, any of us." "And what would that have changed?" Blake didn't answer. She just looked down, ashamed. Maya walked to her, stopping a foot away. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Maya said, "You're strong, Victoria, but strength isn't dominance, it's restraint. Remember that." Blake blinked back something she didn't expect, guilt disguised as tears. "I thought you were trying to make us look weak." "I was trying to make you see what real strength looks like." They stood there in silence, surrounded by the hum of distant generators and the faint scent of detergent and metal. Maya adjusted her duffel. "Don't let them take your humanity. That's the first thing war asks for." And with that, she turned toward the door. Blake called after her, voice barely steady, "Who were you, really?" Maya paused, hand on the handle, light spilling over her face. She smiled faintly. "Someone who stopped being a soldier when I realized the uniform doesn't define the soul." Then she was gone. Outside, dawn was breaking, soft light creeping across the compound, touching every wall, every scar, every quiet secret. Lieutenant Cross stood at a distance, watching her walk down the long gravel path toward the waiting jeep. Kane stood beside him, arms folded. "She'll disappear again," Cross said quietly. Kane nodded. "That's what she does." They watched until the jeep vanished beyond the gates. Cross frowned. "You really think she came here just to observe?" Kane exhaled, eyes fixed on the horizon. "No, I think she came to remember who she used to be." Later that morning, during the daily assembly, Blake stood among the candidates. Cross addressed them, voice steady but softer than usual. "You'll hear rumors about what happened yesterday. You'll want to know the truth. Forget it. Focus on your mission, your purpose. But if you learn one thing from candidate Sinclair—" He paused. "Let it be this: not every scar needs to be visible to be real." The words sank deep. And somewhere inside, Blake felt something shift, the brittle edge of her pride breaking into something more human. That night, long after lights out, she found Maya's notebook under her mattress, forgotten or perhaps intentionally left behind. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside were pages of precise notes, not about missions or tactics, but about people. Lines that read like poetry disguised as analysis. "Strength is not silence, it's choosing when to speak. Fear hides behind rank more often than behind weakness. Every soldier carries two wars, the one outside and the one inside." The final page held just one sentence. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Blake closed the notebook slowly, her hands trembling. And for the first time since training began, she understood what the program had been trying to teach, and what Maya had come to remind them of. Not perfection, not obedience. Humanity. Outside, the night was still. But somewhere beyond the fence line, a single engine started, faint, distant, fading into the dark. And though they would never see her again, her presence lingered in the silence, in the scars, in the space between orders and compassion. The kind of legacy that doesn't need medals. Just memory. What happens to a place after a ghost leaves it? The bass felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just emptier in a way no one could name. Maya Sinclair was gone. Her name had already been erased from the daily roster. Her locker reassigned, her bed stripped, her files sealed again. To new recruits, she'd never existed. But to those who'd really seen her, the silence she left behind was louder than any command. Blake noticed it first. She woke before dawn like always. The room still smelled faintly of detergent and steel, but without Maya's presence, that steady rhythm of breath, that subtle calm, the air felt heavy. Lewis stirred from the next bunk. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," Blake said. Still thinking about her. Blake didn't answer. She didn't need to. Everyone was. Training resumed like nothing had happened. Orders barked, drills repeated, hours ground down into sweat and exhaustion. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. The recruits no longer chased numbers or ranks. There was less boasting, fewer sarcastic jabs. Even the laughter, when it came, felt quieter, more real. It was as if Maya's quiet dignity had rewritten the unspoken code of the place. Cross noticed it too. During the morning run, he timed the squad and frowned at his stopwatch. They weren't faster exactly, but they were more together. Steps aligned, breathing synced, purpose replacing pride. He didn't say it aloud, but he knew that was her doing. After the run, Blake stayed behind on the track, watching the sun burn through the morning haze. Her shirt clung with sweat, her pulse slowing. She didn't understand why she kept expecting to hear Maya's voice, that calm, analytical tone pointing out something she'd missed. "Adjust your stance, Sergeant. You're losing leverage." She could almost hear it. Instead, she heard Cross's footsteps behind her. "You're still thinking about her," he said. Blake gave a dry laugh. "You're observant, sir." "She changed the air here," he said simply. Blake looked down at the dirt. "She made me feel small." "No," Cross said softly. "She made you see how big you could be." That shut her up. Later that afternoon, Cross called her into his office. The blinds were half drawn, the smell of coffee and paper filling the air. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Sit." She did, posture straight, eyes wary. He opened a folder, her evaluation file. "You've improved." "Improved," she repeated. "In discipline, awareness, emotional control." She frowned. "Emotional control." He leaned back. "You used to lead through intimidation. Now you lead through presence. You might not see it, but your team does." Blake didn't respond right away. "She did that," she said finally. Cross nodded. "She reminded all of us what leadership really looks like." He paused, then added quietly, "You know, Kane thinks she came here to test us." "Test us for what?" "Humanity." Blake smiled bitterly. "Guess we failed." Cross shook his head. "No, you learned." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Blake found herself drawn to the old shooting range, the one Maya had used when the others were asleep. The targets were still pinned, faded by wind and sun. She picked up a rifle, checked its chamber, and aimed. The first shot cracked through the air, clean, precise. Then another and another. Each echo carried fragments of memory. Maya's calm voice explaining breathing patterns, muscle control, restraint. "Don't fight the recoil," she'd said once. "Let it teach you rhythm." Blake lowered the rifle, eyes burning. "I'm trying," she whispered. The wind caught the words and carried them away. Over the next week, whispers spread again, not of mystery this time, but of rumor. Someone had seen Maya's name listed on a restricted operations board. Another claimed she'd been spotted at an airfield outside Quantico. No one knew what to believe. Blake wanted to ask Kane, but the man was impossible to read. When she finally caught him outside the main building, she blurted it out before she could stop herself. "Sir, is she gone?" Kane's gaze lingered on the horizon. "Gone is one word for it." "Will she come back?" He almost smiled. "People like her don't come back, Sergeant. They just reappear where they're needed." Blake frowned. "That's not an answer." "No," he said quietly. "It's the only one you're going to get." Then he walked away. That night, Blake opened the notebook again. She'd read it a dozen times, but the words still hit differently every time. Strength is the space between impulse and reaction. Silence doesn't mean surrender. You can win a battle and still lose your soul. She flipped to the back, the last blank page. And for the first time, she wrote something of her own. She came to test the program, but maybe she came to save us from ourselves. She stared at the words for a long time, then closed the notebook gently. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a whisper of approval. The following morning, Cross gathered the candidates in the briefing hall. His expression was unreadable, voice steady. "Next week, we begin final phase evaluations," he said. "You'll be graded not just on endurance, but on leadership and ethical judgment." He paused, scanning their faces. That means understanding when not to pull the trigger, when to stop, when to think. He didn't mention Maya's name, but everyone felt her in those words. Blake stood in the second row, silent. Something inside her shifted, a decision taking shape. Later, after drills ended, she sought Cross again. He was in the range tower, reviewing logs. "I want to lead a team," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You already do." "No," she said. "I mean really lead, not just command." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then prove it, not with strength, with restraint." Her jaw tightened, but she nodded. For the first time, she wasn't seeking validation. She was seeking purpose. A week later, the evaluation exercise began. This time, Blake's team moved differently, tighter, quieter, synchronized. They didn't bark orders or compete for control. They adapted. Halfway through the mission, one recruit panicked under simulated fire. Blake dropped beside him, voice low and steady. "Breathe, you're fine, we don't leave anyone behind." The words came out instinctively. The same words Maya had said weeks ago during an endurance drill when someone else had stumbled. By the time they reached the extraction point, the instructors were silent. When Cross debriefed them, his expression gave nothing away. But as he dismissed the group, he called after Blake, "Good work, Sergeant." She turned. "What was good about it, sir?" He smiled faintly. "You didn't shout once." That night, alone in the barracks, Blake sat by the window. The base lights shimmered beyond the fence line, ghostly in the fog. She whispered to the dark, "Where are you now?" No answer came, only the quiet hum of distant engines. But she felt it, that same unspoken calm that used to radiate from Maya. She closed her eyes and breathed it in. For the first time in years, she wasn't restless. She wasn't angry. She was becoming. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, somewhere across an ocean, beneath an unmarked hangar, a shadow moved through a dimly lit corridor. A small figure in tactical black handed over a file to a man whose uniform carried no insignia. "Target confirmed?" he asked. Maya nodded, embedded, undetected. "Same directive?" "Yes," she said. "Observation first, then correction." The man opened the file, satellite images, personnel profiles, encrypted data. He looked up. "You sure you want to do this again?" Maya's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I never stopped." He hesitated. "They said what happened at Little Creek wasn't approved." "It wasn't supposed to be," she said softly. "Some lessons can't be taught by command." He studied her face, then closed the file. "You've got 48 hours before deployment. Any requests?" Maya's gaze drifted toward the hangar doors, faint light bleeding through the cracks. "Just one," she said quietly. "Don't erase them." He frowned. "Who?" "The ones who still believe." And then she was gone, disappearing into the same kind of silence she'd left behind at the base. Back at Little Creek, Cross stood at his office window. The stars were faint, scattered behind clouds. He sipped cold coffee and looked out across the empty parade ground. Blake approached, knocking once before entering. You wanted to see me, sir. He turned, handed her a sealed envelope. Orders. You've been cleared for advanced leadership selection. You earned it. She blinked. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, he said. Thank whoever reminded you what leadership really is. Blake smiled faintly. I already did. He tilted his head. When? Every time I didn't take the easy way. She turned to leave. Blake, Cross said suddenly. One more thing if she ever comes back. I'll be ready, Blake said. Not as an enemy, not as a rival, but as a mirror. Outside, the night air was cool. Blake looked up at the stars, the same stars Maya had once used to navigate when her compass failed. She smiled to herself, whispering the words she'd found in that notebook. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And as the wind moved softly through the training ground, it felt, just for a heartbeat, like Maya Sinclair was still there. Watching, guiding, waiting. How do you keep your soul clean when your hands are built for shadows? 2 months after she disappeared from Little Creek, Maya Sinclair was standing in the middle of another war that officially didn't exist. The desert around her was silent, a vast expanse of stone and wind, scattered with the wreckage of another empire's ambition. Heat shimmered off the rocks like ghosts rising from the sand. She wore no name, no insignia. Just matte gray fatigues, dust-streaked boots, and eyes that had learned how to measure danger by silence. Her transport had left at dawn. No one saw her arrive. No one would see her leave. Her mission file was simple. Objective: infiltrate, confirm rogue assets' location. Rules of engagement: observe only. Cover: civilian contractor, logistics. Observe, always observe. But Maya knew better than anyone. Observation was never that simple. By midday, she reached the outer perimeter of what looked like an abandoned research facility. It wasn't on any map. Through her binoculars, she counted 6 guards, minimal movement. Too quiet, too clean. Something about it didn't fit. She adjusted her focus. The insignia on their uniforms had been removed, but the body language, alert, precise, screamed military. Private contractors, maybe, or something worse. Maya crouched behind a ridge, pulled out her field tablet, and typed a quick transmission. To Phantom Command. Status, location confirmed. Possible black site activity. Requesting update on rules of engagement. The reply came 6 minutes later. Maintain position. No engagement. Await further instruction. She sighed, of course. She closed the device, eyes lingering on the compound below. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to watch. But watching sometimes was its own kind of war. By nightfall, she'd found cover inside a half-collapsed outpost half a kilometer from the facility. She set up surveillance, camera, scope, encrypted recorder, every movement mechanical, practiced. Her hands worked automatically. Her mind, though, drifted. She thought about Blake, about the look on the young Marine's face the last time they spoke, half guilt, half awakening. She hoped the girl had held on to it, the restraint, the dignity. Maya had taught it once, but teaching was easier than living it. Especially out here, where morality was a rumor. Hours passed, the desert cooled. The night became a tapestry of sound, insects, distant engines, the crackle of old radios. Through her scope, Maya watched the guards rotate. A single truck arrived, headlights off. 2 men exited. One was tall, lean, moving with authority. The other, restrained, blindfolded. Her stomach tightened. The prisoner's gait was weak, stumbling. But there was something in the shape of his shoulders, the way he carried his weight even under duress, discipline. Military. She zoomed in. When the floodlights shifted, she saw the prisoner's face for half a second, bruised, bloodied, but unmistakable. Lieutenant Nathan Cross. Her pulse didn't quicken, not outwardly, but her fingers trembled slightly on the scope. She lowered the rifle, mind racing. It made no sense. Cross wasn't intelligence. He wasn't Black Ops clearance. He trained recruits. Why was he here? Her tablet buzzed softly, a new message. Update target identified. Containment protocol authorized. No extraction, no contact. Her breath caught. No extraction. No contact. She stared at the screen, disbelief flickering beneath her calm. They knew he was here, and they were leaving him. For several minutes she didn't move. The desert wind brushed against her skin like a whisper of conscience. Observe only. She followed that order her entire life. Watch, record, report, never interfere. But then she remembered the notebook she'd left behind, the words she'd written for Blake, the lesson she'd sworn to embody. Strength isn't silence, it's knowing when to act. She closed her eyes, steadying her breathing. And when she opened them again, the decision was made. It took her less than 10 minutes to prepare. She ditched the surveillance kit, stripped her vest down to bare essentials: sidearm, knife, smoke canister, 2 flash charges. No backup, no comms. The old Maya might have planned every detail, waited for authorization. This Maya didn't need permission to do what was right. She moved like shadow, low, fluid, silent. The moonlight caught her for a heartbeat, then lost her again. Within minutes, she was at the facility wall. The metal was hot from the day's sun, but her gloved fingers found holds easily. She scaled, swung, and dropped soundlessly onto the other side. A guard's silhouette appeared near the generator. She froze. One breath, too. The man turned away, muttering into his radio. She moved past him, ghost-like, every step an echo of training so deep it had become instinct. Inside, the hallways were narrow, concrete walls, faint lights, recycled air. She navigated without hesitation. Every structure like this followed patterns: control room near center, holding cells below. She reached a security door and used a bypass tool from her belt. The lock clicked open after 4 seconds. Inside, the air smelled of metal and old fear. Cross was slumped in a chair, wrists bound, eyes half shut. He looked up at the sound of her steps, confused, squinting. Maya. Her name came out like disbelief, wrapped in pain. She crouched beside him, cutting the restraints with her knife. Quiet. He swallowed hard. They said you were dead. I know. You should have believed them. A faint smile flickered through his bruises. Still giving orders. Still ignoring them, she said softly. He tried to stand, but she stopped him. You're hurt. Just my pride. Good, you'll need it. They moved quickly through the corridor, footsteps silent. When they reached the outer gate, headlights cut across the compound, a patrol truck turning the corner too early. Maya grabbed Cross, pulling him into cover behind a generator. 2 guards, she whispered. I can handle one, he murmured. You can barely stand. Still a soldier. She gave him a look, part exasperation, part admiration. Fine, on my mark. She tossed the first flash charge. The explosion of light blinded the guards just long enough. Maya moved in, 2 precise strikes, 1 disarm. The second guard went down without a sound. Cross took the rifle and followed her out. They sprinted across the compound, toward the drainage culvert at the perimeter. Gunfire erupted behind them, blind, panicked. Keep low, she shouted. They dove into the culvert, the echo of bullets ringing above them. For a moment, there was only darkness. Then Cross whispered, Why'd you come back for me? Her voice was steady, because someone has to. They reached the extraction ridge an hour later. Maya scanned the horizon, no pursuit, just endless desert. She handed Cross a water pouch. He took it, still staring at her like he didn't quite believe she was real. You disobeyed orders. Wouldn't be the first time. He chuckled weakly. You risked everything. I already lost everything worth risking. Her tone was calm, but something flickered behind it. Fatigue, sorrow, truth. Cross studied her. You could have stayed gone. Why come back at all? She looked out at the horizon, where the sky was starting to pale with dawn. Because the world doesn't fix itself, she said quietly. Someone has to walk into the fire and remind it what mercy looks like. He nodded slowly. You sound like a ghost trying to be human again. Maybe I am. They hid in an abandoned relay tower until nightfall. Maya set up a small fire, barely visible. Cross dozed beside it, exhaustion pulling him under. She watched the flames dance, fragile, contained. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something dangerously close to peace. But it didn't last. Her tablet buzzed. Command unauthorized interference confirmed. Immediate extraction denied. Detainment order issued. She stared at the words for a long moment. Then she powered the device off and dropped it into the fire. The screen cracked, curled, melted into silence. She wasn't going back. Not this time. When Cross woke, she was sitting on the edge of the tower platform, watching the stars. He sat beside her, groaning softly. You burned your lifeline. It wasn't mine anymore. So what now? She looked at him, tired but still fierce. We disappear. Find the people who built that facility. End it. He frowned. We. She smiled faintly. You owe me a favor. He laughed once weakly. You saved my life. That's not a favor, that's debt. Then pay it forward. He turned to her, serious now. You really think one person can change how this machine works? Maya's gaze returned to the stars. Not the machine, but maybe the people trapped inside it. She paused, voice softer. That's enough for me. By dawn, they were gone, two figures moving across the desert, swallowed by rising light. No one would record their names. No official report would mention their escape. But somewhere, deep inside the unseen network of intelligence and silence, alarms were already spreading. A single phrase appeared in encrypted messages across the world. Phantom asset AWOL, directive compromised. And under it, another, added by someone who knew her, perhaps Kane himself. Let her run. Some ghosts don't haunt, they heal. Back at Little Creek, a letter arrived a week later unmarked, hand-delivered to Blake's bunk. No return address. Inside, one small note in careful handwriting. He's safe. Keep teaching them what I couldn't stay to finish. MS. Blake folded the paper, pressed it against her chest, and smiled through tears she didn't bother to hide. For once, the lesson wasn't about orders, or obedience, or strength. It was about the quiet duty that lives between all of them, to protect what's left of the soul, even in a world that keeps trying to take it. That night, as the wind rolled off the coast and the lights of the base shimmered like stars reflected in restless water, Blake whispered to herself, words she'd learned from a woman who had become legend. Sometimes, doing the right thing means walking alone. And in the distant desert, under the vast silence of another dawn, Maya Sinclair walked on. Not as a soldier, not as a ghost, but as a reminder that even in war, compassion is an act of rebellion. How far can you go to stop the wrong before you become it? The desert stretched behind them like an ocean of silence. The horizon burned with early light, pale gold fading into ash blue. For 2 days, Maya and Cross had moved without stopping, cutting across forgotten routes, following instincts that had nothing to do with maps. They spoke little. Words were unnecessary between people who'd already shared enough silence to understand it. But even silence can't bury questions forever. You're sure they won't track us? Cross asked as they stopped near a dried riverbed. Maya was kneeling over a tablet she'd salvaged from the compound, its cracked screen flickering faintly. They will, but not fast enough. He crouched beside her. You wiped the signal. I redirected it. To where? She looked up, eyes glinting with dry amusement, back to the ones who sent it. Cross whistled softly, "You've got nerve. I ran out of fear years ago." She said it quietly, like a confession that cost nothing because she'd already paid for it long ago. By nightfall, they'd reached a ghost town, a forgotten village carved into the cliffs, half buried in dust. Once it had been a mining station. Now it was just bones and echoes. They set up camp in what had once been a chapel. The roof was half gone, the altar crumbled. The air smelled of old stone and memory. Cross found a corner to rest, while Maya worked by the dying light of her headlamp, patching the tablet into an old military transponder. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Looking for the reason they built that facility." "I thought it was just another off-the-book site." "No," she shook her head slowly. "Black sites exist to hide things. This one was designed to create them." He frowned. "Create what?" Maya hesitated, scrolling through encrypted files. Her eyes moved fast, scanning, decoding, assembling. Then she stopped. "Human augmentation trials," she said finally. "Cognitive reprogramming. They were turning prisoners into autonomous operatives, soldiers without conscience." Cross's jaw tightened. "That's inhuman," she finished. He looked at her. "You were one of them, weren't you?" Her hands froze. "Phantom Directive," he said softly. "They didn't build soldiers like you by accident." She didn't look up. "I volunteered. I believed in it once." He stared at her, the calm face, the measured tone, and realized that beneath all that control was guilt deep enough to drown in. "What changed?" he asked. "I started to remember the faces," she said quietly, "the ones they called collateral." They spent the next day digging deeper. Every file they opened was worse than the last. Missing people, doctored death reports, operations rewritten to erase accountability. Cross scrolled through an old mission log, his expression darkening. "They used your unit as field data. You weren't a team. You were an experiment." Maya nodded once. "We were told it was for efficiency, eliminate hesitation, remove emotion. They called it the purity protocol." "Jesus," Cross muttered. "They said it would save lives," she continued. "They didn't mention whose." For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Cross said, "We can expose this. We have enough data." Maya's fingers paused over the screen. "If we send it, they'll trace it in seconds. They'll find us. They'll kill us both." "So what's the alternative?" "Find the person behind it." "And then what?" She looked up, eyes cold and resolute. "Then we decide if exposure is justice or just revenge." That night, as Cross slept, Maya sat outside the chapel ruins, staring at the stars. Every breath of wind carried dust and memory, fragments of all the lives she'd crossed through and all the souls she'd left behind. She wasn't haunted by the things she'd done. She was haunted by how easy they'd been. Somewhere inside her, the soldier and the human were still at war. She closed her eyes, whispering to the quiet, "Don't let me lose again." 2 days later, they found him. The man behind the black site. Colonel Adrian Shaw, her former handler. He was exactly where she expected, hiding behind security layers, a false identity, and the illusion of loyalty. His name surfaced in the encrypted archives, attached to off-book funding trails, hidden under medical research grants. Cross looked at the data and shook his head. "He's in Ankara." Maya nodded, "Not for long." By the time they reached the outskirts of the city, the storm had already begun, literal and political. News networks whispered about missing military shipments, unmarked aircraft, disappearing scientists. Maya moved through the chaos like a ghost, hood up, eyes scanning, every motion planned. Cross followed, still limping slightly but steadier now. "You sure this is smart?" he asked. "Smart isn't the goal," she said. "Necessary is." They tracked Shaw to a private airstrip north of the city. From a distance, Maya could see him, older, grayer, but with the same posture of arrogance she remembered. He was boarding a small jet, briefcase in hand. "This is it," Cross whispered. "We can take him alive, bring him in." Maya's gaze stayed fixed. "You still believe in bringing people in?" "I have to." She smiled faintly, sad, almost tender. "Then you'll be fine when I don't." Before he could stop her, she moved. Two guards went down before they even saw her. The third fired. She ducked, rolled, disarmed, silent efficiency born of muscle memory and ghosts. By the time Cross reached her, Shaw was on the ground, her knee pressed lightly to his chest, her pistol aimed between his eyes. "Hello, Colonel," she said. He looked up, breathing hard. "Maya, you're supposed to be dead. So were the 36 men you buried under experimental loss." His jaw twitched. "You were part of it, you knew the cost." "I knew the lies," she said coldly, "not the price." He tried to reach for the briefcase, but she kicked it away. "You can't stop what's coming," he spat. "You think I'm the only one." "No," she said softly, "you're just the one still breathing." Cross stepped forward. "Maya, stay back." Her finger rested on the trigger. Shaw's eyes narrowed. "Go ahead, pull it. You'll prove we were right about you." The words hit like a slap, not from truth but from memory. She hesitated. And in that hesitation, she saw it, the edge she'd been walking since the day she left the directive, the difference between justice and vengeance. Shaw saw it too. "You don't have it in you anymore," he sneered. "You've gone soft." Her hand didn't move. Then Cross spoke quietly. "Don't let him turn you into what he made you to be." Maya blinked, the sound of his voice cutting through everything else. Her arm lowered just slightly. Shaw laughed. "That's it, the human act, the weakness." Maya's next movement was almost gentle, a quick strike to the side of his neck, enough to knock him unconscious without ending him. She stood breathing hard, eyes distant. Cross exhaled slowly. "You did the right thing." She stared down at Shaw's still form. "No," she whispered, "I just did the harder thing." They dragged him to a secure bunker nearby, one Maya had used years ago as a safe house. By dawn, she transmitted his identity, files, and evidence to 3 independent networks: journalists, whistleblowers, and one trusted name buried inside the Pentagon. Once it was out, it couldn't be erased. Cross watched her send the data and asked, "You really trust them?" She shook her head. "No, but I trust truth to make noise." Hours later, as they prepared to leave, Cross looked at her. "What now?" Maya slipped her weapon into her pack, the question lingering in the air. "I disappear again," she said, "until they build another shadow that needs breaking." He nodded slowly. "You could come back with me. Little Creek needs people like you." She smiled faintly. "No, Nathan, it needs people like you." He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. He saw it in her eyes, the quiet finality of someone who'd already chosen exile as penance. She walked toward the hangar door, sunlight spilling over her face. He called after her, "You're still a soldier, you know." She paused. "No, just a witness." Then she stepped into the light. That evening, headlines began to break. Unidentified whistleblower exposes unauthorized U.S. black site operations. Human experimentation program linked to Phantom Directive. Pentagon promises full investigation. The world would never know her name, but somewhere under the noise, truth had found a heartbeat again. Cross returned to Little Creek weeks later. When he walked into the training yard, Blake was there, stronger, calmer, leading a new batch of recruits. He watched as she corrected a trainee's stance, not with a shout but with patience. She saw him and smiled faintly. "You found her." He nodded for a while. "She's gone again, isn't she?" "Yeah." Blake's eyes softened. "Figures, ghosts don't stay long." He handed her something, a small flash drive. "She wanted you to have this." Blake turned it over, curious. "What is it?" Her report, he said, about all of us. Blake hesitated, then asked, was it good? Cross smiled. It wasn't a report, it was a reminder. That night Blake plugged it into her terminal. The file opened with one line of text. If they strip you of your rank, your pride, your name, remember what's left is the only thing that ever mattered. Then a second line appeared. Your humanity is your mission. Blake leaned back, eyes shining in the glow of the screen. And for the first time since Maya left, she didn't feel abandoned. She felt chosen. Far away, under another horizon, Maya Sinclair sat alone at a weathered table in a dim cafe by the sea. A radio hummed softly behind her. Outside, gulls screamed against the wind. She stirred her coffee, glanced at the newspaper headline about the exposure, and smiled faintly. The world would go on pretending not to see the truth, but she'd lit a spark. And sometimes that was enough. As the sun set, she reached behind her neck, tracing the edge of the tattoo that had once exposed her to the world. The ink was fading, the scars beneath it were not. She whispered into the sea breeze, almost to herself. I was built to erase humanity. I chose to remember it instead. And as the waves rolled against the shore soft, endless, unjudging, it felt, for once, like forgiveness. When do ghosts finally stop walking? Weeks had turned into months since the leak went public. The world had moved on, or at least pretended to. The investigation hearings made headlines for a while. Blurred faces, redacted statements, denials wrapped in patriotism. But beneath the noise, the ripples kept spreading. At bases across the country, programs were paused, funding reviewed. Somewhere in that quiet rearranging of power, the phantom directive vanished again, buried under another name, another file. And Maya Sinclair disappeared with it. At least that's what the records said. Far from Washington, along the windswept coast of Portugal, a small cottage clung to the cliffs above the Atlantic. The waves below sounded like slow breathing, the kind that never stops but never hurries. Inside, Maya sat by the window, watching the sea fade from blue to silver. The world believed she was dead again, and she was content to let it. She spent her entire adult life trying to be invisible. Now invisibility was finally mercy. A stack of letters sat beside her on the table, none stamped, none mailed, each addressed to people who'd never read them. Blake Cross Kane. She wrote them anyway. Not to explain, just to remember. Blake. Leadership isn't about standing tallest. It's about bending when everyone else breaks. If they ever tell you compassion is weakness, remember, it's the only weapon that doesn't rust. You reminded me what hope looks like when it's still young enough to believe in itself. Em. She folded the note carefully, slipped it under the others. The wind rattled the shutters, and she smiled faintly. The sound reminded her of the old barracks doors slamming in the Virginia wind. Different world, same ghosts. That night she dreamed, something she hadn't done in years. She was back in the training yard. The air smelled of salt and sweat. Cross was there calling commands. Blake was laughing, running laps, her boots kicking up dust. And then silence, everyone turning, the sun behind them. She could feel the weight of every stare again. That same day they stripped her bare, the day her scars became proof of something no one could unsee. Only this time she wasn't afraid. She looked down at the tattoo on her spine, glowing faintly in the dream light, and realized it wasn't a mark of ownership anymore. It was history written in survival. She woke before dawn, heart steady, the first calm breath in years sliding through her lungs. When the sun rose, she made coffee, black and bitter, the way soldiers drink apologies. Her radio hissed softly from the counter. A voice came through, faint, encrypted but unmistakable. Ghost 1, this is Cross. She froze, then smiled. He hadn't used her call sign since the war. She pressed the transmitter. I thought you deleted that frequency. I did, his voice crackled, but someone left it open. Accidentally. He chuckled. Nothing with you is ever accidental. There was a pause, the kind that carries more meaning than words ever could. Then he said, you should know Blake's running her own unit now. They call them the quiet company, small teams, integrity first. They built the program around your notes. Maya blinked against a sudden sting in her eyes. Then it worked. It did, you did. Another pause, then softer, you could come home, Maya. She looked out at the endless sea. I am home. Static filled the line. Cross didn't press, he knew better. Then, wherever you are, stay safe. I'll try, she said, but safety was never the point. The transmission clicked off. The silence that followed was heavy but kind. For the first time in years, she left the cottage and walked down the narrow path to the cliffs. The wind caught her hair, salt-wet and wild. Below, waves shattered themselves against the rocks, relentless and forgiving all at once. She closed her eyes, listened. Every mission she'd ever taken replayed behind her eyelids, faces, voices, the smell of dust and blood and rain. And then, faintly, another sound, laughter. The kind that came from people who still believed in better days. She realized she missed that. Not the war, the laughter. The living. A few days later, a letter arrived by hand. No stamp, just her name in clean handwriting she recognized immediately. From Victoria Blake. She unfolded it carefully. Ma'am, they say ghosts don't leave footprints. You did. Every time we take the field, we follow them. We built something new here, a place that remembers why we fight. We kept your phrase on the wall of the training hall. Your humanity is your mission. If you ever want to see what you started, there will always be room at the table. Blake. Maya stared at the letter for a long time. Then she laughed softly, quietly, the way someone laughs when they've finally forgiven the world for surviving them. That night she packed a small bag. Not weapons, not uniforms, just the essentials, her notebook, a compass, and a worn photo, a younger version of herself with a team that no longer existed. She looked at it one last time before tucking it away. Let's finish this properly, she murmured. The trip back to the States took 3 days. No one questioned her papers. She moved like air through airports, through checkpoints, through memories. When she arrived at Little Creek, the sky was the same pale gray she remembered. The buildings looked newer, but the sea smelled the same, steel and salt and second chances. From a distance, she could hear Caden's calls, the rhythmic thunder of boots hitting dirt. She smiled. Blake was waiting near the training yard. Older now, stronger, eyes calm in a way Maya had never seen before. When she saw Maya, she froze, then saluted instinctively. Maya shook her head. Don't salute ghosts. Blake lowered her hand, smiling through disbelief. You came back. Just visiting, Maya said. Wanted to see if you kept the promise. Blake motioned toward the new hall. On the wall, stenciled in black paint, were 6 words. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Maya stared at them, her throat tight. You remembered. We all did. They walked together for a while in silence, student and teacher, soldier and soul. Blake told her about the recruits, the ones who questioned, who cared, who refused to lose themselves. And Maya listened, proud in the quiet way only the unseen can be proud. Later, as dusk fell, she stood at the water's edge, watching the sunset bleed into the Atlantic. Blake joined her. What will you do now? Maya smiled faintly. There's always another shadow, but maybe it's not mine to chase anymore. Then whose is it? Yours, she said, all of yours. Blake nodded slowly. We'll make you proud. You already have. For a moment they stood together, 2 generations of soldiers, bound not by rank but by understanding. Then Maya turned toward the horizon, the last light catching the edges of her hair like fire. That night when the base went quiet, she slipped away, no ceremony, no goodbye. Just footprints in the sand that the tide would soon erase. She walked until the road disappeared behind her. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a small aircraft waited, its engines whispering readiness. The pilot in old contact, silent as the stars, handed her a file. No name, no coordinates, just a code name, Mercy Line. She didn't open it, not yet. She climbed aboard, set her bag down, and looked out the window as the plane lifted into the dark. Below her, the coastline shrank to a thin silver thread, the place where she'd left her last trace of peace. Ahead, only sky. At 30,000 feet, the pilot glanced back. Destination confirmed. Maya smiled, always. She leaned her head against the glass, watching the stars burn cold and distant. Somewhere below, men and women were still training, still learning what she'd learned too late. That the hardest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with conscience. That the real enemy isn't fear, it's forgetting who you are. And that sometimes the bravest act isn't fighting, it's forgiving. Hours later, as dawn broke over a foreign land, the plane touched down on a strip of sand that wasn't on any map. Maya stepped out, boots sinking softly into the new earth. The wind carried the scent of rain. She looked at the horizon and whispered, "Still here." Then she started walking, steady, unhurried, each step fading into the rising light. The waves came in behind her, erasing her footprints one by one. Not as loss, as release. Because some stories aren't meant to end with victory. They end with peace. And somewhere far behind her, carved into a wall at Little Creek, her words remained. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.